Hi everybody, I'm here with Jude Cowan Montague today. I've been watching lots of her Latvian songs. I've seen her perform them live a few times as well. She does a lot about the old folk tunes, I suppose they are from Latvia. So I wanted to welcome you, Jude, and tell me about Latvian folk songs and the mythology of it all.
Yes, they're called Latvian diners. And although I'm not Latvian, I have some Baltic heritage in my blood that always made me intrigued about Eastern Europe, because when I grew up, it was separated from our life by the Iron Curtain. And my dad would occasionally take me over through the Iron Curtain because he was a bit of a Jack the Lad, my father, and he would like to, all the currency dealing and all the slipping and sliding and all the he would really enjoy the interactions with the border guard. I remember once he smuggled some currency in a copy of an old cassette of the Kinks, and it was picked up by the border guard, and they picked it up and went, oh, the Kinks, and he found that hilarious because the money was in it and they were just looking at the Kinks anyway. So he was just that kind of character, having fun with the ways of the world and the little culture clashes. And but I think he was also drawn by the fact of this forgotten Baltic ancestry that he knew about, because he was brought up by his grandma, and his grandma's granddad was the chap who came from, I think it was probably more like Lithuania, but that from, he'd been a seafarer, he'd gone to Scotland. So that was family interest. But then I got more interested through a bit of research that I did into the Sydney Street siege in London, the biggest gun battle on British soil. And I wrote a little book about Alfred Hitchcock getting in with them, and they.
Very good book it is too. I recommend that to people.
Thank you. It was a good fun, and also I used to squat in the East End around there, and so that made me interested in the sense of place. So yeah, the anarchists were Latvian, so they spoke Latvian. So I was hooked, and I got a writer's residency in Latvia at a place called Ventspils, and went there for a month. And as soon as I got there, I'm somebody who loves to sing songs in different languages and get into culture. And I discovered that the Latvian diners and Latvian folk song was a thing. So I just got completely hooked. And anybody who wants a little cinematic entry into it, I recommend. There's a film in the 1970s called Put Fejini, Blow Winds, based on an old folk tune the score is written by a chap called Imants Kalniens, and I think he's a wonderful composer.
Because you've
So that's him.
because the songs you've been singing are actual authentic is it folk songs?
Yeah, they are. They're
Yeah.
called diners because that's sort of what this tradition of folk singing or folk song is called. And they've survived, a lot of them, in poetry. They were collected in the late 19th century. And there is a famous cabinet of these folk songs that were collected in words. It's one of the UNESCO treasures, and it's still there. It's a physical little cabinet with loads of little drawers with these little folk songs in them, little folk poems, and they all follow a similar pattern, like a similar rhythmic pattern. They have their stress on the front of the word, and they're in four metered pieces. So they have this poetry repetition thing about them. So they make up a really interesting body of work. But one of the things that really interested me as well is it introduced me to the mythology of Latvia. And that's what we were going to talk about today, is this mythology, because there's this whole bunch of pantheon of gods in Latvia, and they come up in the folk songs, because a lot of the folk songs, they're not like our kind of folk songs of, oh, she left me always, and or she got pregnant and then she died and it was terribly tragic. But I think a lot of British folk songs, or I don't know, Irish folk songs I've come across, which I've sung a lot of, they often follow this kind of personal tragedy pattern or something like that. Whereas these are much more like spells or incantations or prayers or communal gatherings type songs. And they're often to a particular god at a particular time of year. And it introduced me to the gods. There's the one I got most infatuated with right at the beginning is Saule, because she's the sun goddess. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh wow, there's a sun goddess. I didn't realize. I always thought it was Apollo when it was a bloke. It's like, oh no, it's a sun goddess. Okay. And then what about the moon? Because people always have, oh, the silvery moon lady, it's dripping around. Oh, hello, I'm Selene, or something sort of like that, secretive and sort of shy or something. But no, it's Menace, the god of the moon. And he is a
Menace.
menace. Menace, yeah. It's the same as the month. Menace, like menopause, I suppose.
Yeah.
Menstruation, all
And
this
you're
stuff.
saying he is a menace.
He is a total menace. Yeah, he is the god of the soldiers.
Oh,
And
how
you
weird. You'd think the sun would be the one of war, but right.
no, turn it all around. It makes sense when you get in the new package because menace. One thing that makes him a good god of soldiers is that soldiers go on the move, and the moon follows you, as you know, as you move around. And especially at night when you're sitting around chatting, you look in the sky and there's your god watching over you. He's the same god as everywhere, even though you're soldiers away from home. And that's one thing. And the other thing is, the moon waxes and wanes and changes color. It's got a lot of changes about it, and that kind of goes with his, I'm going to say mercurial now, but maybe that'll distract because mercurial, I think of Mercury, but the volatile, a kind of volatile type of personality who might be enraged and cross and then really not, perhaps he's waiting to be cross. He's up and down. He's like a bloke with mood swings. Like, no, that's
Well, like
not.
the moon goes up and down and grows and wax and wanes. So that does
Yeah,
fit.
sometimes it's like, oh yeah, oh, I'm all like, I've got the red rage. And then other times he's just hanging out. Yeah, just watch it. Yeah.
So that because you also did some songs about the goddess. I've forgotten her name. Was it began with D, Donana or something?
Just trying to think.
Or
Uh,
maybe I've got it mixed up with the word because you were saying they're called Danas. These
oh
songs.
yeah, Diners. Yes, they are. That's the name of the folk songs. But yes, Saule. So Saule is the sun goddess. She's really. Let me talk about her just 1 second because she's. I
Yeah.
think she's really key because she's really important. Well, she's like a godmother rather than a mother because she might not be a literal mother, but she has her own daughters. But she's like a godmother because she blesses people with the lovely sunlight, like that sunlight that's coming through now out the window, but in that kind of gentle sun thing. Is one of her aspects. And she also is about the turning of everything because she's always there during the day and then at night she goes away. So she's on her cycle of everything. It's turning around, and the symbol of the circle is to do with her going through the day, going through the night. Then she's asleep at night, and then she wakes up. And yeah, this
Because when
is.
you do your songs, are you using the original instruments? Because sometimes you've got these. Well, I love them. They look medieval to me. These little guitars and things. Or are the tunes already with the songs? Like when you found them, or are you putting your own tunes?
No, I mostly do a version of the found songs, not always, but mostly. And there are a lot of tunes that have been collected, but a bit like some other folk songs traditions, the tunes are collected and there's strong tunes and they get associated and de-associated with the words. But there is a kind of a whole batch of sort of tunes and dances as well that have been preserved in Latvian culture. So there's a lot to draw on, a lot of tunes there, and a lot of very jolly tunes, and a lot of very upbeat kind of melodies and stuff. But I think with folk music, you can make it whatever you want at any age. It does change. And okay, there's a place for real purism and keeping it traditional so you can pass it down. But I think when it comes to performing, you're also able to do whatever you want. You should feel quite free, I think, because we only live once and we're only ourselves. We just have to express who we are at this moment. And that's kind of what people always did in the old times too, because they didn't have a big cabinet of folk songs when a lot of these were put together. They were living in the here and now. I mean, they were living in the modern age, weren't they? Everybody does.
Do you think were these songs? Like we have Old English. So are these written in Old Latvian? I can't say it. An old style.
Yeah. Kind of. There's different dialects even in Latvia, although it's a small country. There's different areas, and usually when people put them out there, publish them, process them. So people like me who speak a little Latvian, but not such good Latvian, so that we can get a handle of the songs. When people do that, they tend to organize them in terms of the area, so you get an idea of where they've come from, because there's distinct differences in how Latvian's spoken in different regions. The region of Latgale, which is East Latvia, stands out quite a lot. That's quite a different place in some ways to where Riga, the capital, is, or Kurtzeme, which is West Latvia, because the Easter Latgale has had a different history in a way in the in the early modern or the late modern age. It had a different history because just different kind of settlements. A lot of the old believers came over from Russia when there was the schism in Russian religious history, and it's quite complex. It's sort of simple but complex, isn't it? We won't go into the old believers, but that's one thing that made it a different kind of area, and it had a different kind of lordship system there. It was, I think it might have been closer to Poland, or I won't go into, because I can't remember exactly what it was, but it had a different history.
And with these songs, are there many where did the old gods of Latvia interact with the peoples, or are they just stories about what the gods and goddesses were doing in the pantheon of their time?
They're more, most of the ones that I've been singing have been more to do with the religious practices and also the rituals of the year, which carried on in all the farmsteads. And of course, being an agricultural country, a lot of them are based on what people have to do at different times of the year. So it's very sort of natural paganism, because there's different rituals that come in for the change of the seasons, for the jobs that have to be done, of course. You have to gather the crops, you have to harvest them, you have to then celebrate that. And for instance, at this time, this is the time of Velu likes, which is the time of the spirits. The harvest has been done. We've been celebrating Umis, who is the god of the harvest. That's all been done in the harvest festival. Now it's time. I don't know so many songs to do with this time, but it's a very definite time to do with reflection on those who've departed. And Latvian has a very big cemetery culture. So now is the time to light a candle, maybe put some food out for somebody in your family who's no longer with you. You might talk about them, sing a couple of their favorite songs in a very domestic way. But then there's all sorts of different festivals. One of my favorites is in the spring. There's a special day when the horses are let out into the pasture because before they're kept in the stables in the winter time. And that is a great celebration. And Usinch is the god of the horses, and he's the god of the bees as well. So he's wonderful. I think that's a really fantastic moment in the year.
Well, and so he's a he god, is he? Usinch?
Yes, he is, yeah.
How do you spell that? I'm intrigued.
Oh,
if you don't remember, it doesn't matter, but I like horses and bees.
I actually do know how to spell Usinch. It's one thing I can answer. It's U, capital U, Sinc, with a little, what do they call it? I can't remember. It's got a diacritic over the top.
Or something on the top. Yeah.
To make a ch. And I think they do that a lot in quite a different, some of the Slavic languages. It's we don't do it in English. We just put ch, don't we? We just write ch for a ch. But yeah, they've got one of those, Usinch.
All right, I like him. I'm going to be speaking to him. Well, not speaking to him, but do a little prayer to him later. Where can people see some of your tunes? I know you have a YouTube channel where you put some of these up.
Yes, I do. And also I've been talking about them on the radio. And I also did a little EP, which I'm really proud of this year with Matt Armstrong, where we tried to reimagine some of the songs. And we used actually our Hammond organ and some different instruments for that. 4 tracks, really pleased how they came out. It's nicely produced. And I called it Gulu, which means sleep, or I sleep, Gulu. After a famous song that's on the record, Esgulu Gulu, I sleep, I'm sleeping. And it's a lovely track. I just love the way we used the instruments. And for this, we didn't use traditional instruments. We used Hammond organ, and we used instruments in different ways. We bashed this, what do you have to call it? A lap steel, and I sort of hit it with a piece of wood and made a sort of ringing sound. So, and I used a washboard, and I was like rubbing a stone around on a washboard. So we were making some naturally sounding, sort of just playing with sound to get this ritualistic sort of deep kind of thing going. I'm really pleased
Oh,
with that.
that's good. I didn't know about that album because I often use, for those who listen to my 33 and a third show, Jude's normally has a track on each one, or a Hammond organ track is on each episode because you're one of my favorite artists. So I like to play your stuff, but I didn't know about that album. And your radio show that you do for, are you still doing the one for the London? Yeah, promote your radio show.
Yeah, I do a show every week on Resonance, which I've been doing now since 2014. I'm really still fired up for it, and I have a different subjects every week. It's called the News Agents, and I try and go in depth into one subject that really tickles me at the time. And I've got a curious, wandering mind, but I also have things that I always come back to, like music. And but I want to just say, Debbie, actually, this point, I just did a couple of shows on Bollywood, which is an area I often come back to, and it's been so fascinating, the connections between Latvian and the Indo-European type of thinking, the idea of an Indo-European language, because I really see the similarities. Sometimes they pop up every now and then, and you're hit with it like a blow between the eyes. As somebody who isn't a linguist, but who is an enthusiast for song and who's interested in Hindustani song and Latvian song, I'm sometimes just blown away by things that are similar. And I was going to mention it with Usinch because it's a horse culture, and it's, which of course the Bhagavad Gita and a lot of those, is it the Bhagavad Gita that's the horse? I'm sure it's got chariots in, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the Bhagavad Gita, the big war. But then that's how they travelled. They had the chariots that were pulled by the horses, and they revered their horses and their cattle. And they also did songs to the gods, like, which is what people seem to have gotten to do now. They all do songs, like you say earlier, love songs and broke up songs, when it should be, we should be singing to the gods. The gods want
Yeah.
us to dance.
Yeah, well, I think it's that you can see the cultural similarities, or I can. I kind of, I'm just surprised myself all the time by it, and I think there's a definite relationship here between the culture of the Latvian folk song and of the Latvian mythology and the Indo-European. What we have, remember, from Sanskrit and the languages. Every now and then I see a word that is so similar, like danvayad, thank you in Sanskrit is just like thank you, and danka, actually in Latvian it's quite a different word, it's paldies, but but you just you see these things, and they make you think, like, wow, that's amazing. The sacred language of Sanskrit is sort of almost is similar to what I say every day, thanks.
Well, I think in the ancient times, people were moving about the world much more than our academics want to say. I think people were interacting. Also, I think maybe the lands were slightly different. Maybe it was easier to get across, which is why there's such a mixture coming. And obviously, they're passing on each other's songs, and then people would perhaps like that song and think, oh, I'm going to sing to my God, in that kind of tune. And it influences each other.
Yeah, and I think men in particular, because of soldiers, and they really moved around a huge amount, I think, because they just arrived. I mean, look at my ancestor, the sort of seafarer just turning up in Scotland. I think particularly like men would move from country to country. I think they're looking into that now with genome research, isn't it? The differences between female populations and male populations, sometimes quite different. And I'm sure it's not just invasion, it's not only invasion, but
No.
just migration and
For
trade.
commerce and all kinds of, like trade and things. And I just think people were moving around more then, or maybe they had other magical ways to get about. But I wanted to thank you very much for this, Jude. It's very enlightening. I love to hearing about other religions and theologies in other countries. And my introduction to it was all through your music. So I remember when we did that, you were singing and I did the Talk Nostri Osman Spera, Alex Monk's thing. And that was just wonderful hearing it performed live. Obviously, it's great to buy the album as well, people, the EP.
Yeah. Oh, and I thought I'd just like to little drop for somewhere I'd love to take this conversation when we've got another time, which is about the prehistory. And I think there's a real link with Latvian culture, or with the culture in the songs, in the folk song, to prehistory in a way that we don't have in the UK, because our history has been so much more interrupted in terms of the folk traditions or the pagan traditions. A lot of what we've got is sort of re-put together more recently. And I think Latvian songs are lucky in that they've got a slightly more continuous practice, which is, I think, really interesting for us who haven't been brought up with that. So I find that really exciting. And also, I wonder whether there's an opportunity to discuss at some point the stone circles, because of the stone is a very important thing in the Latvian folk song. And also, I think Saule, the sun goddess, can shed some thinking, some imaginative, speculative thought on what the stone circles might have been connected to, ideas that, because we often think of sacrifice and sort of blood and scary stuff, whereas the Saule, sun goddess, it's a very benign, imaginative mythology.
Okay, let's do that next. This one's going to run out soon because I've just had the little message come up. So I'm going to thank everyone for watching, and we will continue this very soon. So thanks, Jude, very much for taking part in this. I'm going to press stop.